prize represented to me the most of the highest prizes that I have been receiving. American Society of Cinematographers. That represents to me a very valuable prize because it is voted by the professional photographers from here. They organization, they have all the best photographers of the world in the organization. And that's why it's very important to me. This is the Figueroa clouds in Italy. I am famous for the Figueroa clouds because always I use an infrared feature that they use it for night effect and I use it for daytime effect. It was very heavy. I have to open up the diaphragm to f2 and then shoot with that feature in Acapulco with the sun completely high and get the result of the clouds, being very beautiful. I will tell the students to follow the same thing. First, I started with the German Expressionism. Next to Eisenstein, Potemkin. And next, Toland technical solutions. But I'd recommend to the students to study all the Flemish paintings, starting with Van Gogh and Jan Vermeer and Rembrandt, of course. But Jan Vermeer, he was very sharp following the light. He was a very good painter, but it's the best to follow the light in his painting. I recommend him, Vermeer. Then after, from Spain, Velázquez, the perspective, and Goya, the caprichos, the Goya. And from Mexico, Rivera, Orozco, and Siqueiros. You have near here in Pomona College, you have a painting of Orozco painting, the Prometheus. It's an extraordinary mural painting in Pomona College in California. And I follow them. And besides that, the engraving people like Mendes and Posada, I follow his style. So that's a mixture of all the European painting and Mexican painting that I did. That's the way I recommend to the students to look at all the reproductions of the painting, to follow the light that they have there. Primarily, I was a good friend of Diego Rivera, and Diego Rivera said that I was the best muralist in Mexico because my muralists traveled all around the world. Then to Siqueiros and Orozco and Mendes. Let's talk about Mendes. I use Mendes to do the titles of the picture. He looked at the picture and they invented the images for the titles. Appeared first the engraving and later came out the titles, the letters. That we make about 6 pictures with him, with Mendes, Leopoldo Mendes, the great. He was the best engraver in the whole world. The main thing for a picture is the book, the writers. And for the Mexican movies, it's impossible now to follow that system because Vargas Llosa, Carlos Fuentes, and Garcia Marquez, they charge $1 million for the rights of his books. And it's impossible for the industry to pay that amount of money. That's the difference with the old movies and the new movies. They have to take news from the newspaper and develop a story. Make stories that already they are out of paying any cent at all. I had a proposition to do Viva Zapata. And they invited me to go to Hollywood and listen to the script. It was written by John Steinbeck and will be directed by Elia Kazan. So in the moment, I had a little problem with the American consul in Mexico. And then I refused to have the visa because the questions that he asked me, I said, no, give me my passport back and my $10 that I paid there, get the stamp out, and I'm not going to Hollywood. So I told them that. And then Elia Kazan and John Steinbeck came over to Mexico. And in Cuernavaca, we had 3 days of talking about the story. In the first place, I didn't like the story. I told Steinbeck, because Steinbeck was the writer of the Perla. And he was a very good friend of mine. And I frankly, John, I said, you haven't established what Zapata was fighting for in the first place. It does not appear in the whole story. So we got arguments. That was another argument that Zapata was visiting his sweetheart, and the lady that he was in love with, and the whole family was there. And then they said, Zapata said, no matter the monkey dress in silk will stay monkey. That's something that Zapata couldn't say. So I refused that. I said, take this sequence out. And then, well, they take notes of everything. When we finished, Elia Kazan told me that I was very brave to discuss with Steinbeck for 3 days. I said, I didn't discuss with Steinbeck. We discussed the script from Zapata, which I know more than Zapata than him. That's why I didn't make the picture. A year after, they came with another script, and they have the same sequence. They didn't take it out. They finally make a very, well, possibly a script. It was not bad. And but the phrase of the monkey stayed there. And I refused to do the picture. My story becomes with the Maria Candelaria picture that we presented in France at the Cannes Film Festival and won the first prize for direction and photography. And that was my style already. And my style, I cannot explain how I do it, because I don't know how I do it. The first 2 days, Fernandez let me put the camera wherever I wanted to put. And then next day, he saw rushes. And he didn't realize what he has been seeing. I went farther away from his imagination. So from that moment on, he let me put the camera wherever I wanted, go or high, wherever it is. And I worked with Fernandez that way. He marked the setup first. I want this. And then I did the composition. I moved the actors to get a real composition. And then after that, Gregg Toland was coming to make The Fugitive with John Ford, which was the best director of the world. And then came Miriam C. Cooper, the producer, director of the first King Kong. He was associated with John Ford, came to Mexico, and we were putting all the equipment inside the stage. In that moment he arrives and they say, maybe I will make some pictures in Mexico. Will you let me see how you work? I said, by all means. We offered a chair. He sat and started watching. I didn't know that he was watching me. Then at night we invite him to see rushes. And that was the rushes of the Enamorada picture. That's the best ending of any picture I have done. And then the lights come on, and then he called me, Cooper, said, come on. How many days of work are these rushes that we have seen? I said, it's 1 day and 1 night. And he says, you're under contract. Contract for what? To work with John Ford. I was ready to faint in that moment when I got the news to work with Ford. And then, coming to Hollywood again, he told Jack Ford that he said that I was an excellent photographer, but I had a system that I will put the composition. And Ford says, oh, that's interesting. I will follow the same. And he followed him. That's why The Fugitive is my best photographic picture that I have done in all my 225 pictures that I have made. Well, my relationship with the actors and actresses was excellent. We become friends all the way through. Dolores del Río, Maria Félix, Pedro Armendáriz, and Arturo de Córdoba were the principals, and Pedro Infante too. And we were friends, very intimate friends, because Dolores del Río used to invite my wife and myself to Newport, and we stayed there for nearly a month with Dolores del Río. Pedro Armendáriz was my best friend, and we were in parrangas all the time, more or less, drinking a lot. And that, I can assure you, I never have a drink working. Nobody had the strength, the power that they have, because they had charisma. They were charismatics. The Dolores del Río scalp is perfect, Mexican scalp. And Maria Félix, she was a very beautiful woman. And Pedro Armendáriz has his eyes like a tiger, because that was the moment of the gold time from the Mexican movies. And we formed the union, the independent union, with Negrete, Cantinflas, and myself. We headed the union, and we developed the industry quite well. Some of the actors, they are in politics, especially Silvia Pinal, Julio Alemán. They have been deputies in the political party, the PRI. That's the only, also López Tarso too. He was a deputy. And they are next to Mexican politics. The rest, we don't care for the Mexican politics. For instance, in Spain, I had a round table with the press. And the first question that they asked is if I have worked in Spain. And I said no. They invited me a couple of times, but the last time that they invited me, that was Francisco Franco in the government. He was the president of Spain. And I refused to go to Spain for Franco. And I answered the question this way. I said, I received a cable inviting me to photograph a picture with Dolores del Río, a young man, directed by Gabaldon, Mexican director. I said, I have to answer the cable with another cable. It's not a special condition whatsoever, but in the case that we have to work in Madrid, I will go if you take Franco out of the cast. And they approached me for 3 minutes, standing up, give a very good applause. In the other, in Germany, for instance, last year we were in Germany, and they ran about 15 of my pictures there. The first picture that we showed, that was Macario, because it was a story by B. Traven. And that was an excellent picture. And we finished the festival with a fugitive in the University of Bavaria. And then the students was there. And they asked me questions. And the last scene, they did me a proposition. Why don't you stay a few days, Mr. Figueroa, and give us lessons of illumination? The screenplay is very difficult to make because no, I don't know any author that is satisfied with the screenplay. Because let's say El Quijote, it's a big book. You have to make it in 2 hours or 3 hours. It's not enough to have the whole book. You have to take something out. And you have to be very intelligent to see what you get out and what you get in. It's very, very difficult, the adaptations. Mostly, I understand well with very great examples that is very well paid more than the author, the screenplay writer. My connection with the McCarthyism is that in Mexico was a director, Robert Rosen, that he got an Oscar for his direction in All the King's Men. And he proposed the Brave Bulls. That's a picture that he's supposed to do. And I had a compromise with Luis Buñuel doing Los Olvidados, and I couldn't make Rosen picture. So he finished the picture, and he called me. Very excited he was in that moment, and came to me and says, "You have to help me," and get me with a coat like this and says, "You have to help me." But what happened to you? Says, I have an appointment in Washington for the activist people. But what have you do to that? I says, I am a communist. Oh, well, that's your problem. And then he says, but you must help me. The only one that I could help you is giving you money, but you have more money than me. So that's not the case. So I recommended to a lawyer a lawyer that was a very old man, a grown, wonderful, talented lawyer. And they told me to talk to him. His name was Luis Cabrera. He was assistant of Venustiano Carranza in 1920. And I talked to him and says, do you know this case of the Hollywood 10? I said, all of that I know, because I have received the press from United States, and I have followed the whole case. The American government has not the right to do whatever they are doing. Bring this client to me. It is very good. So I brought Rosen to him, and he says, I will not charge the airplane tickets and my expenses. I will get all that by my own. This is the last case that I take because I am very old, and this is the last, because I will give a lesson to the American lawyers. So says he told Rosen to bring his passport, and then he said, I will have a letter that you will sign asking political asylum in Mexico, and you bring your family over here. So he says, I will bring it over tomorrow. Next day, I went to pick him up, and I started knocking into the door, and the porter came and says, you're looking for Mr. Rosen? Mr. Rosen left at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he asked me to get a taxi for him to take him over to the airport. So, and I asked him if he had any letter or any paper to me. He didn't leave nothing. So I went to apologize to Licenciado Cabrera. And I said, I am sorry. This man said, oh, he said, you have no experience, Gabriel, but you don't know what fear does to the man when he is in that position. And he was in that position. He was very fair. And that's why he left. And years after, Rosen had introduced me to Dalton Trumbo. That was the first one that they called with the 10 of Hollywood. And he went to Mexico because he had written a story of Moctezuma II. And they were looking for location with the producer and all that. That was around 68 or something like that. And then they finished looking at the locations, and Trumbo asked the production manager from Mexico if he knows Gabriel Figueroa. He says he's a good friend of mine. I'd like to see him before I go back to Hollywood. So they telephoned me and come over to my house. And then Trumbo was with the ice water, you see, embraced me. I say, I am sorry what happened to you, involved in the McCarthy, that you have nothing to do with that. And that causes very many troubles for you. But I have to thank you for all what you have done to the McCarthy's people. And always when I had an interview or something in that respect, I said, it's an honor to be in the blacklist of United States.